Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing show. I'm your host, John Kasman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying this show, do me one quick favor and leave us that 5-star rating and review. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, today we're going to be talking to Damion Lupo. Damion is a best-selling author of more than 11 books in personal finance and money thinking. He's the host of Financial Underdogs podcast and the owner of over 50 plus companies, not to mention the founder of his own martial art, Yokido. Definitely got to talk to him about that. So without any other further ado, let's just welcome the guy to the show. Let's welcome Damion Lupo.
What's up, John? It's good to be back, man. Good to see you.
Absolutely. For those of you who don't know, Damion was a guest on a previous episode. We'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. And Damion, you have a phenomenal story. Again, I implore everyone to check out that previous episode, which we'll link to. But for those who haven't, could you maybe give us just a little context of your background?
You know, you mentioned the 50 companies. I mean, I think that's one of the things that jumps out, because I started off when I was a kid. I had a little Nintendo company, and I did that because I had a problem. And that's what an entrepreneur does. The entrepreneur finds a problem. So I found a problem. It was called, I couldn't afford, or my parents couldn't afford to pay for anything. And they told me we were broke, which we were. And so I went out and started a wholesale retail Nintendo business. And it was to be able to play games. At 11, that was my biggest problem. I mean, if you think about it, it's a first world problem. And so I did that. And then as I went out into the world, I followed everybody else's rules, which is always a bad idea as an entrepreneur, because you're going to be frustrated and mad at everybody for telling you you should do this, and then you should all over yourself. So I ended up leaving college. I actually got thrown out of college because I started a bookstore there. And they said, you can't compete. You actually put the bookstore out of business. This is before Amazon put all the bookstores out of business. And so I put them out of business. And then after that, I said, I'm just meant to do something else. And that's where real estate came up. I thought, this is cool. My buddy said, let's do a deal. I said, great. Did a deal, turned into 150 houses, made a bunch of money, bought the Ferrari, lost the 20 million in 2008, rebooted. And in this process, had a lot of other companies, development, venture capital, insurance companies, precious metals companies. And so the story was really that of an entrepreneur figuring it out, because there's not a perfect playbook. I did as much as I could to figure out that playbook and document it with Unicornomics when I wrote that in 2019. Beyond that, it's about adaptability and resilience and tenacity. That's what entrepreneurial adventures are. It's not about, here's the perfect thing. That's called an MBA. That's not reality for an entrepreneur. So that's kind of what led us to here. And then it shifted from material to mission. That was more about external, meaning other people, than me and my own hedonistic things back in the 2000s. Now it's the entire focus of what I do with my companies and my teams, and why I'm here with you is to focus on the mission of breaking 1 million people's financial shackles. Because right now I look at finance as modern day slavery, that people are in a place where they're scared, whether they have nothing or millions of dollars, they're scared, and they don't really have a playbook or a plan or the tools or the skills or the emotional fortitude to be able to truly be free. And my mission is to help lift people up so that they actually are free going forward, and they can have a life of freedom and not fear.
Man, Damion, I'm going to enjoy this time. We can never schedule enough time, because I have like 12 different places I want to go. So I'm going to try to keep this focused, but I implore everyone to check out more information. First of all, the episode we have with Damion is episode 30. Damion, you specifically back in that episode, you talk about in detail how you went from, getting into the single family business, getting your properties. I think you were doing some work out in Arizona, and then going through a really rough patch, falling off, and then kind of building your company back up. So if you all want to learn about that, certainly check out the episode. I want to go all the way back though, because you talked about, putting the bookstore out of business, and I just can't ignore that. So please explain and tell me how you launched your own company that put the existing bookstore out of business.
But here's an interesting thing. A lot of companies are focusing on shaving. They're shaving money, meaning like you go in and companies say, hey, we're going to do something cheaper. We're going to give you the same thing. We're going to do it cheaper. And they're squeezing margins. Walmart has done a great job of that. Amazon sometimes does that, but sometimes it's just about ease of buying. It has nothing to do with the best price. So when I went into college, one of the things I noticed from being in college a number of times was that bookstores would sell you a book for $100. Now it's probably $300, but they sold it to you for 100. They'd buy it back for 50 and they'd sell it to somebody used for 75. You hadn't actually done anything to the book. I was like, okay, whatever, that's the model. But then I thought, wait a second, there's a 50% margin when they're making money on the resale. I said, I could do better than that. And all the students would do better too. So I just changed the margin. I bought the thing back for $60 and I sold it for 68. So everybody was happy. Everybody that's buying buys it cheaper. And so I wasn't necessarily improving the system or anything else. I wasn't creating more value. I was just squeezing. That's one thing you can do. A lot of people are finding that, and it's a race to the bottom, though, because somebody is going to be better with technology and squeeze the margins, and they're going to kill you because their microprocessing is going to be faster. So the alternative to that is figuring out how to create more value and say, look, I'm the most expensive. Why? Because I'm creating 10 times more value and you're getting 10 times more benefit. That's where there's no competition. The competition all lies in the technology of squeezing margin. And that's where people are fighting and they're losing because you're fighting with Amazon and multi-billion-dollar companies. So that's what I was doing back then. It worked for my little thing, paid for school. In a week, I paid for school, which now would be a miracle considering school's so damn expensive. But I think those are the two things to think about. Are you going to be first? Are you going to be cheaper? Or are you going to be better?
No, I love it. And that goes for all business, right? Are you going to be first? Are you going to be cheaper? Or are you going to be better? And I think that demonstrates, going back to even, you as an 11-year-old trying to get your Nintendo going, it demonstrates kind of that entrepreneurial mindset. It's about solving problems and being creative, and especially those common problems. And as a college kid, I had the same issue, right? You go in, they force you to buy these brand new books. They're super expensive, and then they'll tell you they'll give you 50 cents on a dollar for it, but then they'll sell it back used. I mean, we used to have our own little, we just called them hustles, right? Because we weren't realizing that these could actually be real businesses and that there was a whole entrepreneurial mindset around it. But, we would take it and do something similar where we would just never buy the original book. We would buy it directly from the person who had the class before us. And as long as they didn't change the model, even when they did, we're like, look, they have a new edition. 80 to 90% of the stuff has to be exactly the same. And for whatever is different, we can figure that out. So, I mean, you'd certainly find your ways to navigate the circumstance. But I think ultimately, as a business owner, you have to think about where you fit in the model. Are you going to be better? Are you going to be cheaper? Or are you going to be more efficient, right? So really great tips there. Let's fast forward, right? You mentioned that your vision right now is really to help people break away from, as you described it, modern day slavery. And many folks are taught the same thing. Go to college, get a good job, work that job until you retire. And that's the American dream. And I know that's not your perspective. So when you say modern day slavery, I know some folks may think that is, um, you know, uh, over the top, or, however you want to phrase it. Why do you feel the need to use such strong language to depict and underscore your perspective there?
Because there's nothing more destructive in somebody's life there, and in terms of our ability to tap into our potential, than being under the thumb of money and the financial system that just rapes and pillages the people. Our modern day system, and it's been around for the last 107 years since the Federal Reserve was put in place in 1913. This is where money was created basically by a centralized system, instead of it having free interaction between people, like freedom. And what happened is, back then they said, okay, well, let's figure out how to enslave people with money. It's the Rothschilds and the Morgans and these people back in the day said they really don't care who runs a country. It doesn't matter whether it's Trump or it's Biden. They just said, as long as we control the money, we control the world. And that's absolutely true. So when you think about that, if they control the world, isn't that pretty much serfdom, slavery? It's them controlling other people. We're not free. If you and I go out and we earn $1, and then we sit there and we look at that dollar, part of money, the whole purpose of money is to store value. And if that money loses 1 or 2 or 3% every year because of a fraudulent system, then we're being stolen from. People say, I want my taxes to be lower. You're being taxed behind the scenes, invisibly, basically in secret, because of this inflation thing. In fact, one of the craziest things is, since 1920 and 2020, that's 100 years, It used to be that an ounce of gold was $20.67. Today, it's $2,000. That's a 99% loss of purchasing power. So if you just think about that, the reason I say it's slavery is because we work harder and harder and the money's being printed faster and faster. And who does that benefit? The people that are closest connected to it. It's not people. It's these oligarchs, and it's almost tyranny. So it is a strong word because it's a huge problem. And I don't know that you have anything other than, unless you're talking about sex trafficking or really, people that are enslaved in cages. This is a society systemic problem, and it's something that can be fixed. So if you're in a jail cell or somebody's got you captive, that's one thing. You don't have a whole lot of options. Here, it's financial literacy. It's literally a choice to say, I'm going to learn how to break these shackles. And so that's what we're doing. We're saying we're on your team. We're not going to do it for you. We're going to do it with you. We're going to inspire you and elevate you and educate you. That's the whole point of why I am doing this and why I get up in the morning. It's an obsession, not an obsession about the latest Facebook feed, which is what most people do. They're bouncing all over creation. I'm obsessed with one thing. And so everything comes from that. And I think it's healthy for us to find that one thing and then just go crazy.
Yeah, Damion, I love the way you think about that because it really comes down to helping people find that freedom. We can define it however you want to phrase it up, but most people I know and most people I talk to, and I would imagine most people listening to this show, what they're ultimately looking for is financial freedom. They're looking for the ability to break away from the institutions, the W-2 job, and have enough independence to live the life they really want to live with the resources to do so. It's funny because, I spend a decent amount of time on Twitter, more of a lurker than a poster, but I do enjoy my time on Twitter. And there's a group of people that absolutely detest capitalism. And as you were talking, I can't quite tell which side of the fence you sit on, because some folks think of capitalism in the way you kind of described, where there's this small group of people and they control everything, and the rest of us are minions trying to find ways to escape. And other folks look at capitalism as kind of the equal opportunity neutralizer or equalizer for anyone to go out if you got a great idea or great business proposal to go out there and create that financial freedom. I don't want to get too technical, but I am curious just to think about the way you view money and view capitalism.
Well, here's an interesting thing about that. When I see people that are out there and they're setting things on fire and they're getting rowdy and they're going crazy and they're mad and they're saying this is all a scam, here's what's happened. They don't feel like they can make it happen. And I think that there's a lot of people that have gotten to that point. And I don't care if you started off in the ghetto. I don't care if you started off on third base and you think you hit a home run when you go and score. The reality is, if we don't think we can actually create wealth, we tend to, as a mindset, we tend to go and try to take it. We say it's not fair. It should be redistributed. Anybody that believes that they can do it is more likely to say, I want a chance to go do it. I don't want somebody to give it to me. Like, you look at people that are given money. I look at my family. Somebody dies and they all turn into morons, like super morons, because money makes you stupid when you're not ready spiritually and emotionally for it. So I'm of the mindset that as long as there's an equal playing field, and there's not going to ever be an equal playing field because we've got corporatism, statism, meaning big companies are connected to the government. And so they have an unfair first dibs on things. They have money, like lobbying. If you read J. Paul Getty's book, lobbying is the most valuable marketing money or any expense a business can have, because you spend $1 million, you make $1 billion. Well, the average person doesn't have that ability to lobby. So then it looks like it's unfair. So I believe in a fair playing field. I believe that we should have the ability to go out there and create whatever life we want. The problem I have is that there are a lot of systems that are keeping people down because of regulations, where as somebody starting up can't go spend $1 million or $2 or 10 with attorneys and accountants to even get in the game. So then the big players, whether it's banking or insurance or pharma, they're basically dominating and they're keeping everybody else out. Even with good ideas, you can't get in because of the government, because of all of the behind the scenes deals. So I don't know if that tells you anything. I'm about free markets. I'm about truly people having a fair playing field, not saying, hey, we're going to have the same equity, which we've heard on Twitter recently. Hey, let's have equal opportunity and equal equity. BS. The equal equity means no matter where you start, you get to the same place I am. And that means that we're taking something from somebody. The government doesn't have a magic pool of money. You're taking something from somebody and giving it to somebody and bringing them up. Where's the incentive? Where's the competition? It's gone. So I believe that a fair playing field is what we all really want if we dig down deep enough to ask the right question.
Yeah, I love the way you broke that down there. Damion, let's kind of move on and talk about how we create that, right? So right now, when you look at kind of the financial service space, we talked a lot about real estate investing on the show, but specifically, the thing behind that for most people is it's one of the vehicles that they can control, right? You can buy an asset, you can fix it up, you can manage it. A lot of times they appreciate in value, and you've got this equity you can tap into. So that's one of the tools, one of the vehicles that we use to create wealth. And as we think about where we keep our money, how we manage our money, I know that a lot of big institutions, the Fidelities of the world, the Bank of Americas, they certainly have a specific view and want to control where most Americans should and could put their money. I know you've got some thoughts on that. Can you elaborate there?
These institutions, when you think about their purpose is to get bigger and make more fees. And there's an interesting wall art that says something about serving customers, which if you actually look at what they do, it's like, give me a break. You all serve yourselves and you always make money, and the customer may or may not do well, but they're always going to be fed on. And so I don't look at these institutions as necessarily helpful to the population. I look at them as feeding on the population. It's like the dang matrix. And can you get value from having a Fidelity account or having a relationship? Maybe. It kind of depends. What's more important is your own financial literacy. And here's the secret that everybody wants to ignore, as if it's like kryptonite or something. It's called work. Like going out there and actually doing the work. People don't want to do the work. They want a freaking lottery ticket. And I look at it and I go, you want a hack? It's called work. They go, no, it's a hack. I need the hack. And I go, look, I know I like Tim Ferriss too. I like the 4-hour work week, but the reality is you're not going to hack your way into it. And because somebody else is going to be working 5 times more than your 4 hours a week or 10 times more, and they're going to crush you. And you're going to say, well, then the government should bail me out, or the financial institutions are a scam. Well, create your own financial institution. You think, that hedge fund is making all the money? Start a hedge fund. Like, it's not that hard if you're willing to do the work. So these financial institutions, bottom line, they're not there to make you rich. They're there to feed on you. And if you understand that, then you start asking better questions. What else is there? And that's the key, John. It's about the better questions. You ask better questions, you get better answers. Ask bad questions, it's like bad crap in, bad crap out.
Yeah, and so Damion, with that noted, right? Most people, your average American, is going to work at least to the age of retirement. So for them, when they think about investing, it really comes down to that 401k, maybe an IRA. I know you've written multiple books on just financial planning, specifically retirement planning, and there's different vehicles, different ways that we can plan for our retirement. Can you just talk at a high level about what some of those options are and maybe some of the pros and cons of each?
So there's basically 2 things, the default things, and this is what most people have. You either have a 401k, or if you're in a government, you have a TSP, federal government, or a 457, 403b. These are all the same thing. They're all under the tax code as tax shelters. And then a lot of people have IRAs. That's a $10 trillion industry. So there's a lot of people that say, oh, I'm either starting an IRA or I rolled over my other stuff into an IRA. All these vehicles are just vehicles. They're not an investment. People think they're an investment. They're like, oh, I'm invested in a 401k. No, your 401k is an investor in something. And so when we start to say, okay, well, why do we have these things? We have these things because they took pressure off of companies that were doing pensions that were going bankrupt back in 1974 when ERISA came into play. This is what created all this stuff. And basically what these things do is it allows us to think that we're going to actually have a big pile of money that's going to allow us to retire. The truth is, and the scary truth, is that if you do whatever you do as a job, you're a firefighter, an accountant, a government bureaucrat, or whatever, and you go from, I'm a great, solid, smart worker, and I get a job done for 30 or 40 years, and I wake up one day and I've got this pile of money, and now I'm an investor. Now you're scared to death. Now you're like, oh man, I don't want to lose it. And you have no skills because our system isn't set up for people to actually be educated. It's set up for them to be gamblers. They go, my 401k is $2 million. And I go, now what? They're like, I have no idea. I don't want to lose it. And then you play not to lose. And guess what happens? You tend to lose all your money, which I've seen way too many times because people don't spend anywhere near the time learning how to be an investor as they do learning the skills and tools to earn money. And so what that traps us into doing is always trading time for money instead of allowing our money to be working for us, instead of allowing other people's energies and wisdom to be working for us, and having our assets taking care of us versus our time, which is really just a death sentence.
Yeah, how does one make that transition, right? Because to your point, I mean, if someone's got a full-time job, your passion is in whatever you do, whether you're a teacher, you're an educator, you're a firefighter, a lot of those folks are not necessarily trying to go and get a master's degree in the stock market or other things like that. So how do they, get educated enough to make wise investments and not simply just pray that this retirement account is going to be sufficient to get them through their lasting days.
I think everybody has to shift to be more of a farmer instead of a hunter. And I don't, if you want to go shoot an elk or something, that's cool, but that's not what I'm really talking about. I'm talking about becoming a farmer. Farmers understand seasons, they understand time, they understand seeds. You put seeds into things and then you nurture it. It's the same thing with financial literacy and being able to invest. You spend time, you learn, you do it over a period of time, and everybody is so damn impatient. Everybody wants to have everything happen today. They want all of it. They want it today. They don't want to do any work. So they're greedy, impatient, and arrogant about what is real. So how do you do it? You say, okay, I'm committed to it. I mean, that's the first thing. Part of my mantra, our company, is being committed. I mean, first off, you have to be a little bit fearless. You have to get a little courage, and then you decide, and then you get committed, and then you're resilient through the process. And this is, I think it was Bert Doman on Robert Kiyosaki's show a while back, and he said, if you're going to go become an investor, treat it like a college education. How long does college take? 4 or 5 years to have any type of reasonable understanding of anything. The same thing with investing. If you think you're going to learn investing and you're going to be awesome in a year or two, you are delusional. If you think that you can do it in 5 years, you're rational if you're willing to do the work. You don't get a college degree because you sign up for college and then go do something else. You actually have to go to class. You actually have to do the homework. So it's the same thing. It's going to be a 4 or 5 year period. And here's the scary part that's going to make everybody pee their pants a little bit. Oh my gosh, it's going to cost you money. You're going to make mistakes. How much does college cost? $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. You're going to be spending tens of thousands of dollars just to learn. People go, no, I need to invest my money. I'm like, you're investing in your education. They go, no, I'm investing in a real estate piece. And I go, yeah, that's called education. When you lose your money, you're going to have an education event. And they go, wait a second, I just want to make a return. I'm like, the education is the first step in that, and it costs money and time. So if you can understand that, it takes the fear away because you go, oh, that's part of the process. So this is the first step, just understanding the game plan instead of saying, got to get my money working. That's called transferring your money for an experience. And that's what most people do.
Yeah, and I think too, for those folks who are concerned about losing their money, right? Who see investing as risky and they don't want to lose that nest egg. I mean, you kind of talked about it, right? If you approach it with that fear of not wanting to lose it, I mean, those are the people who normally put themselves in a position to actually lose it because they're not learning, they're not focusing on the education, they're not really going that next step to really protect their investment and figuring out ways to stretch it or to multiply it and to actually grow it. So you just have to make sure your mindset's there, and whether you're paying for it or however you do it, you have to focus on the education. That's just going to be critical, because if you're investing in stuff you have no idea, don't understand, you're setting yourself up for failure. And don't believe that the stock market is a safe place to put your money. If you don't understand it, if you don't know, like the guys on Wall Street or some of the guys who are working at these big institutions, you're just really gambling as well. You're hoping that it goes well, and you don't really have a sound strategy. Damion, I want to come back to the different ways we talked about retirement, right? You mentioned the two main ones are 401k, you mentioned an IRA, and I think a TSP if someone's a government employee. I know that you wrote multiple books on QRPs. For someone who's hearing a QRP for the first time, what exactly is that?
So QRP, typically when people think of that, they hear that it's a qualified retirement plan. And what we're talking about is tax shelters. We're talking about the tax code under 401 and 408. These are parts of the tax code where the government says, we want you to have money when you retire so that you're not a ward of the state, so that you're not reliant on us giving you money, which is kind of what Andrew Yang wants to do right now, give everybody money. We sort of tried it in March, $1,200 each. But the reality is the government can't afford it because the government doesn't have any resources. It doesn't steal. So so the qualified plans are really just a way for you to build wealth and be able to do it tax efficiently. If you go and let's say you go buy a share of stock or something, and then you sell it, and it's just you personally, you're going to have unbelievable amounts of taxes. If you use a retirement account, then you can eliminate the taxes. People say, how do you do that? Well, there's mechanisms inside of it for any retirement account. You've got pre-tax, post-tax, and so you can do that with stocks, real estate, crypto, gold. Like there's all these different things. People go, wait a second, I thought I had to buy mutual funds. You do if you're part of the matrix. Like there's the code says you can do basically anything other than A, B, or C. And what Wall Street has said is, what's the most profitable thing for us? We sell people mutual funds. We sell them derivatives. We sell them crap that we make up out of thin air, and then we charge a lot of fees. And it's this system. You just have to ask, how is the money moving? Where's the money going? That tells you the story. I mean, literally, whether it's pharma or finance, it's where's the money flowing, and that tells you who's got their, who's directing traffic. And so ultimately, the qualified plans are a tool that the government set up for people to be able to build a nest egg. And part of it, they said, okay, we need to kind of trap people's money until they're 60. We don't want to let them, without huge pain, called a penalty, pull that money out, because we want people to have it grow. And like Einstein said, the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. Well, compounding anything is great if it's for you. If it's a credit card, it's being used against you. So compounding anything, just keep in mind, which direction is it going? If it's in your favor, a qualified plan is amazing, because truly you could be like Mitt Romney if you wanted to, if you had the right information, build up $100 million pile that you're not paying taxes on ever. Think about that. Ever, never, no taxes. That, I mean, you remember back in the the debate, that argument that Trump and Hillary had, where she said he doesn't want to show his tax return because he doesn't pay taxes, and he said that makes me smart. And I always laughed at that. I was like, he just knows the tax code. She's too stupid or arrogant, because she's been a government employee, to understand the code is in place for people to have incentives to go build real estate, to buy real estate, to hire people. And so she thinks that it's actually patriotic to pay taxes. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The government needs people to go not pay taxes, because the only way you do that is if you grow the economy, which, hello, that's what the government wants us to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. We always get into these debates about taxes. And the way I like to think about it is there's an incentive to do the things that the government wants you to do. And the thing that's great about real estate is we know we don't want government supplied housing. Okay. We've seen it. No one wants to live in government housing. You don't decide that's where you want to live, right? You do it if you have to, but we see that they're not going to necessarily give you the granite countertops and the really nice finishes. So if as a civilian, if you can create housing solutions, renovating properties, taking care of infrastructure, doing things like that, they're willing to give you a tax break. If you can help employ people so they have jobs, they're willing to give you tax breaks. So it really is about incentivizing the behavior we want to see, not loopholes that we can hide from the taxes. I know some folks like to blame or point fingers at real estate investors and do so in a way because they're like, all these guys are being sneaky, they're avoiding paying taxes. Like, we are doing our part with the economy. We're providing jobs. We are, continuing to keep the economy moving by hiring contractors and painters and, title companies. And I mean, there's so much movement of money based on the work that real estate investors and business owners, for that matter, they do. That's really the reason that those breaks are in place. It's not just simply a loophole that helps these people. But I'll get off my soapbox because that's not relevant to where I want to go forward. I want to go back just because this is something that people may have a hard time understanding. So when you describe QRPs, the Qualified Retirement Plan, you mentioned that this was a vehicle that government put in place to help people just save for retirement. How does a QRP differentiate from a 401k or an IRA?
Well, it's specifically what we've built over the last decade is an eQRP, and it's a specific thing. So generally, when people talk about QRPs, they're confused because they're talking about qualified plans. They're talking about everything at once, and so then they go, "Well, what's different?"
QRP is just to make sure we got it. The QRP is all qualified retirement plans. Then
That's how most people see it, and so they're a little confused about it. And they say, "I want one of these." I'm like, "Okay, well, which one?" And the ultimate is an eQRP. It's an enhanced qualified retirement plan, and we created it. We're the only ones that do it. And so there's a differentiator between that and, say, an IRA or a 401k. Typically, 401ks give you options for mutual funds. It's very limited. That's almost every 401k that exists. That's what you have: options for mutual funds, bonds, or cash. And with IRAs, there's more options, but you're still limited, and there's still tax consequences because they're not really the best vehicle, especially for like real estate investors. They tend to be very destructive, and you have a lot of friction. And so ultimately the question is, what are you trying to accomplish? And for most people that are listening, that are studying, that are spending time listening to this show and and educating themselves, they're saying, I don't want to just do mutual funds because I don't have any damn control. Like, I want to control, I want to be able to drive the thing. And if you want that, you want to be in the driver's seat. So the difference between an eQRP is that you're in a driver's seat. With a 401k, you're in the trunk, man. You can't even see what's going on. And if you're in an IRA, you might be in the passenger seat, but you still got to tell somebody what to do because there's a custodian. So if you want to actually drive yourself where you want to go, I mean, I guess if you feel like you want to be in a box and you want to be caged in, then maybe a 401k or an IRA is probably a good thing for you. And quite frankly, John, some people are better off and they'll tell you, I just don't really trust myself or I'm too scared. You probably need somebody really taking care of you. But I would say that there are more people that actually do want to do something. They want to control it. And when you have a checkbook, when you have your money and you can decide where you're going to go, that's the right choice for people that are self-responsible. And that's the key. It's the self-responsibility. We've been trained over decades to be victims and to blame and justify why it's somebody else's fault wherever we are in life. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I believe that everybody's lives are up to them. And it's really pathetic when somebody says, well, it's their fault, or I need you to do something for me. And it's like, get out of the way and shut your mouth. You do not. You need to get yourself up and moving. And I think we've just lost that. We've become a nation of very soft people in general. Everything is easy and it's not been a lot of pain. Even a pandemic. I mean, honestly, for most of the population, it's not been that painful. And some people I get it. Some people have died and there's been stuff. But the truth is, we don't have a lot of scar tissue. The last number of decades, there's not a lot of scar tissue where people have the gumption. Like in World War II, you come out of that and people are like, you know what, we're going to go make it happen. I think we need more of that. And it starts with self-responsibility, point blank.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is coming straight from the guy who launched his own martial art and has a black belt. So, but I think you're spot on. It's you got to be able to get punched in the face, and you have to be able to take a punch and move. And I think that there's a sensitivity that has paralyzed a lot of people. And it's funny. I mean, I had this conversation with someone else a couple weeks ago, but ultimately we have more control over our lives than we give ourselves credit for. And we have to respect that. If our life isn't where we want it to be, you have the power to make changes. Just blaming people or pointing the finger, it doesn't matter whether your guy won the election or not. It doesn't matter. It's not going to be the reason you are successful, or if that is driving your happiness, you got some other issues. So you have to take control of your life and figure out what you need to do to make those changes. Damion, I want to make sure I want to drill back in on this, because I love the analogy you did with the car. So the way you talked about it is, if you have a 401k, you're kind of in the trunk, right? So you can't even see what's happening. Someone's making the decisions. They're making the investments. They're trading on your behalf. And you have no clue what's really happening. You're just stuck in the trunk. If you have an IRA, maybe you are in the car, maybe in the passenger seat or the back seat, but you have a custodian that's really driving and making those decisions. But at least you have a general sense of what's happening. But if you want to be in the driver's seat yourself, you need kind of an eQRP, right? That's going to give you the ability to really own and manage your investments. Now, I would push back and say, what about a self-directed IRA? Because, that gives you some ownership as well. I know that there's some checkbook control, IRAs as well. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about that, and in particular, learn more about kind of how the eQRP, the program that you have, how does that stack up against a self-directed IRA, or even, some of these accounts that have checkbook control?
So here's the number of things that make it very different. With a self-directed IRA, one thing is that you still have somebody there's still a custodian. There's still limits on what you can and can't do that are different from an eQRP. You're going to be even if you got in the driver's seat, you've got a checkbook control IRA. You're going to be driving a Yugo. You're never going to be driving an M1 Abrams tank or a bus. And what I mean by that is it's always going to be small. Because you're limited. So you've got a Yugo and it has a ticking time bomb in it if you ever do real estate. So your Yugo might explode. So this is a huge problem. You've got a small little dinky thing. You can only put like $6,000 a year into it. You can't necessarily control all of your investments because you still have a custodian. And if you want to do real estate, which I think is one of the best things for people to invest in and learn about, if you use an IRA, you're going to blow up your Yugo at some point. It's called UBIT tax. And so the alternative is you say, okay, well, I don't want to blow up my thing. I actually want to have a bigger vehicle where I can have a team, employees and things. So I can do that with an eQRP. And I want to be able to put 10 times more money into it, which you can put almost 60,000 per person. So you have an armor plated vehicle that can go as fast as you want. It's like an armor plated Ferrari that looks like a tank. I mean, you have this vehicle that gives you all these options. It's basically impenetrable. And so the question is, what possible benefit would a self-directed IRA have? And here's the thing. A lot of people go, well, I like a self-directed IRA because I can get one at Schwab, or I can get a solo 401k at Schwab and it's free. And I go, you're a cheap bastard. And you're going to get what you pay for, and you're not going to have the resources, and you don't understand all these landmines that you're going to drive over, and you're driving around with a bomb that's going to blow up in your vehicle. And they go, what are you talking about? It's free. And I'm like, yeah, you are going to blow up. So there's distinct differences. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they use Google and they confuse the crap out of themselves. And there's very slick marketers that go, oh, wow, we can, if we can give things for free and trick people into getting sucked into our system, then they'll get stuck. And that's generally what happens with people. They end up with a really bad product that they thought was for free, and it ends up sucking the life energy out of them, plus their checkbook.
Well, I think the education is so important, right? And that's the thing we kind of talked about earlier on. And for people listening right now, I mean, the radar may be going off, right? It's like, wait a minute, I never heard about this. That doesn't make sense. Or how come my advisor didn't tell me about this? Why is that? Why haven't people heard about this? Why is this something that, seems like it could be a superior option, but, most people listening probably have never heard of this vehicle.
Well, I mean, point blank, why haven't you heard of things? Because you've been hearing about other things. You've been hearing about things that are propagated by a system that is making billions and billions of dollars in fees. And what do? They spend hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, and your mainstream media, which is mainstream nonsense for the most part, whether it's the Wall Street Journal or Kiplinger's or whatever, you see propaganda from these institutions. I mean, the IRA in this institution, which I thought was a great thing 15 years ago, has the alternative. The alternative is still a $10 trillion industry that says, oh, come in, we'll give you a free thing. And then they fee you to death. The average IRA custodian is trying to get about $4,000 per year. That's kind of the goal per year, per person in fees. That's crazy. I mean, for what are they actually doing? They're moving paper around, creating friction and frustration in your life. And so the reason you haven't heard about it is because Wall Street and these institutions don't want you to know that you can actually control your money and not pay them any fees. That would make them broke. I mean, you just follow the money and it makes a lot of sense. Why do you know about one thing? Because that system wants to make sure you think that's the only option. And the reality is, once you know about something else, they start losing fees, and they're going to fight to keep you stuck in their system. And they do fight. It is a war.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it makes sense when you think about the marketing dollars. I mean, how many Fidelity, Charles Schwab, and I mean, you just see these commercials, right? And they have millions of dollars to spend on marketing. You mentioned lobbyists earlier. So, I mean, obviously they're spending a lot of time having these conversations. So it is just something to keep in mind. Maybe, there just simply isn't enough awareness of what your options are so you can make educated decisions. I want to make sure that we are following and understanding this, though. So when we talk about a self-direct IRA, whether you have checkbook control or not, you said the limit was $6,000 for contributions, and you are still subject to UBIT tax, unrelated business income tax. You are still subjected to that. Conversely, when you look at potentially an eQRP, that limit is, you said 60,000 per person and no UBIT tax. How does that? I guess, how does the eQRP, I'm going to say get away, but you reframe however you want. But how does this get away with avoiding that UBIT tax and having such a high, I mean, we're talking 10x the limit on contributions. How is that possible?
So there's a couple things. One, when these things were built back in the 70s, the idea was that these retirement accounts would replace more or less pensions. And it was taking the pressure off of companies that had to continually have this legacy cost or exposure to paying people forever until they died. And they said, okay, this is not sustainable. So they said, let's give people something else and we'll match their dollars. You put in 1,000, we're going to give you 1,000. And people said, this is great. Well, it took the long-term pressure off these companies. So they couldn't say, we're going to give you up to 6,000, because people would be like, wait, if I work for 30 years, I'm not going to have crap. So this isn't going to work. So they had to have high enough limits. The IRA was added on for people that didn't have a company plan. That was really why it was put out there. Okay, we need to have something out there. So they didn't want to have some giant amount. So they made it $6,000. Back then it was a lot less, but today it's 6,000. So those are the, I mean, that was the original inception and why it came into play, and why it was put there. The reason that the UBIT tax is on IRAs is because, quite frankly, the 401k industry and the space where the eQRP lives, they have better lobbyists. They said to the code makers, the people that are making the rules, they said, we have people that are developers we'd like to invest our money with. And the developers had the same problem. They wanted to get money from retirement funds, from pension funds, from 401k funds. They wanted to get that money investing in their development deals. So what happened? Developers wanted to be able to do this. And they wanted to get the money, but they didn't want to have their investors getting hammered with UBIT tax. So they said, we want an exemption. So they exempted out the ability, the investors who were pensions and 401ks, they exempted them. But the IRA custodians apparently didn't have very good lobbyists, or maybe no lobbyists, who knows. And so they didn't get exempted. So ultimately what happened is that you ended up with a code that's been pretty sticky for a long time. And so people don't know the difference. What people have found is, unfortunately, they have a deal, they're involved in real estate that has debt, and it's their IRA that's invested. And then one day they get this tax bill, and their accountant says, you owe 35% or 37%. And they say, how is that possible? It's an IRA. And they say, well, it's how it is. There is a penalty here. It's a tax. And people say, well, nobody told me about it. And I've had this investment for 4 or 5 years. And how is this possible? Well, it doesn't really blow up until you have over $1,000 in net income. And so people, that's why I call it, John, a ticking time bomb. And so this code isn't really impacting people until the last few years, where people are having a major tax event. And unfortunately, it's usually too late unless you hear this episode before your project sells, then you can fix it, which is a miracle. But unfortunately, a lot of people are just writing really big checks right now.
Yeah, and listen, this is one of those things that you probably want to learn more about. And as you said, Google may or may not be your best friend. Google University and YouTube University has a lot of great information if you're looking for some simple how-tos, but something that's complex, you may want to just continue to do your research and talk to some professionals. I would actually implore people to reach out to you or your team, Damion, if they want to learn a little bit more. I know you've written a couple of books, so I'm just going to let you, maybe share some of your contact information right now. So if they want to learn a little bit more about eQRPs and maybe think about transitioning what they have or figuring out, what's going to be the best solution for them, they can make those decisions. But what's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best thing to do is to go to eqrp.co. It's the eQRP company. And there's right on the homepage, there's a thing that says learn. And that's what I would implore you to do. Like you said, John, learn from the experts. I mean, I wrote the book on this, and I've written different iterations for different groups. So, when you talk about the authorities, Google is not the authority. Google is just a compilation of a lot of idiots with opinions. And then there's some wisdom. But how do you know which one is which? There's trillions of web pages now. And Google's going to tell you which one is actually accurate. Give me a break. I mean, that's crazy. So if you go to the source, you go to the source, the hay before it goes in the horse, and that's eqrp.co, and get a copy of the book. It's literally going to give you the first bit of advice that's actually based on fundamentals and IRS code and real experience. So go to the site and get a copy of the book. I mean, that's how we start. We get real, raw, authentic information, and then make up your own decision on what's best for you. But stop listening to opinions and Facebook feeds that are based on marketing and algorithms and people's own interests. I wrote this book to give people reality, not just some funny parable that maybe drives them off in the wrong direction. It's just the truth, and that's what we all really should be seeking.
Yeah, and Damion, just before we transition to our bullseye round, certainly, everything has its drawbacks, right? As you look at kind of the eQRP and just really, some of these retirement plans, what are some of the drawbacks, right? What are some of the things that, hey, you know what, in this situation, this probably isn't the best fit?
It's not going to happen for you. One of the questions I get from some people sometimes that I go, this is actually not a good fit for you. They say, well, how much money does my eQRP earn when I put my money there? And I go, none. You've got to go do something. If you want your money to earn something, go throw it and risk the stock market or a bank, CD that makes you 1% or whatever. This is, if it's going to be, it's up to you. And so the eQRP for people that don't want to participate, that are just really passive or And when I say passive, I mean, you don't want to actually spend any time figuring out what you should invest in. This is not a good vehicle for you.
Yes, you don't have to run the investment. Even if it's real estate, you don't have to be the guy running it, but you you at least have to figure out what you want to invest in. So, excellent, Damion. Well, let's transition to our bullseye round. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Losing $20 million in 2008, going from 20 million to -5, was one of the greatest gifts ever because it hardened me. It forced me to build scar tissue in a very rapid way. And I may have shared this in the past, people have heard it, but one of the most powerful things was having a childhood friend that had known me for 30 years say, I hope you rot in hell because you lost everybody's money, including mine. And having people say that, you do one of two things. You cower down and disappear, or you say, okay, I'm going to learn. I'm going to be better. I'm going to go fight for something that's worthwhile, and I'm not going to let this stop me. So having that experience, I don't want to do it again. I would do it again if I had to, if it was part of the plan, the big guy's plan. But the truth is, having those type of things, what I realized there, and I've lost all my money 3 different times. And 2 of those were in the stock market. And that was just because I had no idea what I was doing. The greatest gift is going out there and failing. It doesn't make you a failure unless you stop.
Yeah, losing $20 million. Whew.
And it's just a number. I mean, if people go, $20 million, man, if I lost 20,000, I'd die. I'm like, yeah, you know what? It doesn't matter if it's 20 million or 20,000. When it's all you have plus some, then, and I was literally living and sleeping in my vehicle. I went from Ferraris to the back of a 4Runner. And that's, I mean, for some people, they're like, yeah, it's an upgrade, man. I don't drive a 4Runner. I'm like, yeah, but it's cold in Flagstaff in January, man. Like that is still, it's rough. So just thinking about that, what's the outcome? Well, you get to choose. This is The Power to Choose. One of my favorite books, Your Greatest Power by J. Martin Coe. What's the greatest power? The power to choose. And it's not necessarily what happens, it's how you interpret it. When you interpret it a certain way and say, this is a gift, then you say, what am I going to learn from it? This is awesome. And in the middle of it, trust me, you're not saying this is awesome. You're saying this sucks. It's terrible. And then you move yourself through that. And the move is into self-responsibility where you say, what's the gift from God? What just happened here? And then you go, awesome. Okay, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to do better.
Yeah, what's the lesson? What am I supposed to learn from this and take that lesson and be better going forward? I love it. Let's get back to the bullseye round. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
I always say the same thing, man, the off button, because we're just being killed by all of these feeds and these dings and these the tweets and all this stuff. And what I see people doing is sucking up their life and giving it away to somebody else's algorithm. And so the resource I like best is the off button because it allows me to think. The greatest tool we have is our mind, and yet our mind is being sucked into somebody else's vortex or the matrix. And so I truly believe that if you want to excel and if you want to grow and you want to be free, you have to turn things off and sit still and think.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
The last year, it's funny. I think it's Unicornomics. It's the book that I wrote last year, and it was because
give me one that you didn't write. Come on, man, you're cheating.
Probably Mastery by George Leonard. There's 2 called Mastery, one by Robert Greene and one by George Leonard. And I like that book a lot because if you want to get anywhere in life, you have to commit. You have to go deep. You can't just go wide. Wide is easy. You just watch Facebook for a month and you're like, hey, I know a little about everything. And you're basically worthless, honestly. Or you're really good at Jeopardy. That's about it. That's the only thing that you're going to be good at. But going deep requires mastery. It requires a focus on mastery. And George Leonard, like me, is a martial artist. He was until he passed away. And it's about that process of moving forward, going through things over and over again, plateauing and not quitting. And so I think if you're thinking, man, there's something missing in my life, it's because you're probably not pursuing mastery in anything.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Connection to nature. And I moved in the middle of the pandemic so that I could be closer to nature, and anybody can really do that. And if you say you can't, then you've just deceived yourself. I moved away from concrete because I wanted to be connected to something real. I wanted to be able to run across a raccoon. And unfortunately, so is half of California. They're invading my little nature oasis. But I think that having something, it could be a water feature in your house with a fish tank. Like, who knows? But something that's not just structured and concrete or man-made, but something that is just natural, that has a natural energy, I think is one of the most powerful things we can do and surround yourself. Even a plant. I mean, it's funny, but you could be in the middle of New York City. If you just have some greenery, it might change your life because you're connecting to something that's just has innate intelligence in it.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
I wish I knew that how little I knew, and that I kept more bald gray people around me, so that I could tap into the wisdom. Even though I'm bald and fairly gray now, for what hair is left, I go, okay, I'm going to know a whole lot more in 20 years. So I keep guys and gals around me that are 20 and 30 years older. And that's the thing. No matter how much we know, we're going to know less going forward because we're going to realize how ignorant we were. And so I'm constantly looking at people and saying, how humble can you be to realize you know nothing and ask for help and wisdom and then follow it?
What are you curious about right now?
I'm curious how long it takes to totally disrupt our financial system with DeFi and crypto technologies. It's happening. I'm really curious if it's going to be in 2021 or if it's going to take a few more years, because our system is going to be fundamentally disrupted with tech and people don't even see it coming.
Give me the best place to grab a bite. And where are you at now? You mentioned you moved, so I don't know where you live now.
Yeah, Northern Arizona. Best place to get a bite is, I would say, it's at local juicery in Sedona, Arizona. Clean, raw, real, great owners, great food. It's actually food. It's not just manufactured nonsense with colors. It's actually real.
But Damion, listen, man, I always enjoy talking to you. This has been very great for a few different reasons. I love your perspective just holistically, your mission to help people break free of the shackles of, kind of the modern world we live in, and really try to get that freedom, that financial freedom that they're looking for, and taking more responsibility, really putting the onus on them to take control of your life, take control of your finances, break away from what you've heard, what you've seen in commercials, and what people tell you you need to do from your financial advisors, and really think about how do you create that financial freedom. I also appreciate you breaking down kind of the QRPs, the qualified retirement plans, and giving us more information about 401ks, self-direct IRAs, and the eQRP and how it stacks up against them. And in general, man, just listen to your story, listen to, you as an entrepreneur, the places you've struggled, being open and honest about those things. It's just always helpful to understand that, listen, no matter what you do, you may lose money. It's just a chapter in your story, and you continue to move forward and just get through it, learn the lesson, move to the next chapter. I want to make sure we give your contact information one more time for folks who want to reach out, learn more about you, or maybe check out one of the books you've written. What's the best way to get in touch?
I check out eqrp.co, and if you want to connect with me, just find me on LinkedIn. I mean, I keep it simple. It's one of my mantras. Keep things simple. I'm not going to give you 47 different places. You'll find where you need to go. And here's John, one of the secrets. If you want to connect with people, go to LinkedIn and give them a real message. Don't send them an email, because we all get 8 billion emails, and don't spam people on social. But really, truly, it's amazing how you can connect with people if you're real on LinkedIn. So that's my suggestion for the day.
Damion, pleasure talking to you. It's great to see you, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thanks, John.